Welcome to Study Loop.
In the discussion of externalities, pollution tends to be one of the most common topics covered, and it's because it's so easy to see the negative impacts of pollution, therefore those negative externalities of it. And it also tends to be this issue among firms when it comes to reducing pollution, how to do that in order to yield this best possible outcome for both the environment, society, and these firms who are required to reduce that pollution. So we're looking at part A here, and we'd like to know why it is so efficient for different firms to reduce pollution in different amounts rather than requiring all firms to reduce the same amounts. And the reason for that is because there are different costs among firms when it comes to reducing pollution. So the reason it's okay to allow these firms to reduce pollution in different quantities, it's because it should be proportional to the different costs that are associated among reducing pollution across these different firms. Part B here is asking us about this command and control approach and why it generally is ineffective at targeting these firms who really need to undertake larger pollution cuts, however, they don't. So why is this command and control approach typically ineffective? And it's because it is requiring these firms to reduce only by some certain amount. And once that certain amount is reached, they can begin polluting again. So some firms who maybe pollute quite a lot in excess of whatever this certain amount is, they're going to reduce only that amount and then they're going to stop and they'll be right back to polluting just as much as they were. And so in essence right there, we're seeing that it's really overall ineffective at reducing pollution on a larger scale. Now, part C here is talking about the approaches of corrective taxes and tradable pollution rights. And corrective taxes, what this is it's essentially a tax which is levied on a per unit basis. So this is saying that these firms who are polluting, they pay a tax based upon each unit that they are polluting, whatever measurement that is in. So what we see with these per unit taxes, these corrective taxes, is that people who can reduce their pollution, so if this cost of reduction is less than the cost of that tax, they're going to reduce, right? That makes sense. The cost of reduction is less than this tax, well, they're going to end up reducing their pollution because it's cheaper for them to do that than it is to pay the tax on that per unit pollution. However, if that were flipped, if instead the cost of reduction were greater than the tax, well, then what we're going to end up seeing is that firms are going to continue to pollute. Because why would they, as a profit-seeking firm, why would they choose to pay a tax, or why would they choose to reduce their pollution if they can pay less to pollute, right? They're going to choose to pay that tax instead. Now, tradable pollution permits, on the other hand, tend to be a little bit more effective than these reduction taxes, these corrective taxes, and that's because firms are able to purchase these pollution permits, and this pollution permit allows them to pollute a certain amount. But firms who can reduce their pollution at a lower cost than they could have purchased that permit for. So in this case, what we're seeing is that this cost of reduction would be less than the cost of that permit. So again, what we're going to see in this case is that these firms are going to reduce their pollution. However, if it were greater than the cost of that permit, again, we're going to see these firms start to pollute, or they're just going to continue to pollute. So these tradable permits, what we see happen is that firms are able to trade amongst themselves at whatever agreed upon price they have. So a firm who doesn't need the permit may sell that permit to a different firm because for that firm, it would be cheaper to buy the permit than it is to actually reduce their pollution levels. So what we see between these corrective taxes and the tradable pollution rights is that these permits, these tradable permits, tend to be more effective.